Welcome to the Honest Dog Breeder Podcast with me, your host, Julie Swan, where each week we dive in to discuss all things dog breeding so you can build a breeding business you love, producing dogs that fulfill their owners' dreams. I believe you can have an honest dog breeding program that also pays the bills. So throw those pods in your ears while you're cleaning kennels. I'd love to join you. A very exciting guest today is my brother, Dzwonkowski. He's
Hello.
the creative director for Sports Illustrated for Kids. Go ahead, Andrew.
I hate to correct you right off the top, but the name is actually Sports Illustrated Kids. We got rid of the 4 in like 1995 or something. I'm sorry.
I am old.
Yeah, come on. I want you to be an expert on this stuff, Jules. Let's go. No.
Sports Illustrated Kids.
Thank you.
Got it.
Yeah.
Today we want to talk a little bit about branding and getting branding straight for your business, especially with dog breeding. It can really give the feel of what you're going for. It really appeals to your customer, but sometimes it's a pain in the butt, right? You were talking about it earlier.
Exactly. I think a lot of people are in a position where they need a logo for something. They need a logo for their business. They need something that's going to represent them because you're so passionate about what you do. Yeah. You just want a visual to get across what you're all about. Right. Make it clear for people.
Mm-hmm. Help them feel it.
Yeah, but not everybody is a designer. Not everybody has Adobe Creative Suite to make things in, Photoshop, Illustrator, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So you're in a position where you have to hire somebody to help you make something that's going to represent your brand. Right. So you've gone through that process, Jules. You found somebody that worked for you.
I did actually, thanks to your help on Reddit a couple of years ago for my other business. We hired Caitlin and we found her, and I was looking for somebody that got it. And so, yeah, we found her, and it was a good process, but it's hard. You want to walk through kind of the design process and how that can go? Yeah.
So when you reached out to her, what did you say? You said, hey, I need a logo for this. I need visuals for this.
She came back and actually said, you need a branding kit? And I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Branding kit. Yeah.
What she explained was it was not just the logo, but it was the colors to use, the fonts to use, just everything, so that there was like that unified visual when people interacted with my business.
Right. Mm-hmm. Consistent fonts, consistent colors, consistent visual motifs, if you will, that kind of thing.
Just like I can recognize my dogs when I see them on Facebook, other people post them, like, oh, I bred that one.
Yeah.
It's like you want that with your business, I feel.
Yeah. So for Honest Dog Breeder, how did you land on your color combination?
Oh, I was looking for something that appealed to both men and women. Mm-hmm. It kind of wanted to be calming. I feel like there's so much chaos sometimes with dog breeding that I wanted something to feel calm, so that people were like, oh my gosh, dog breeding feels like stressful. This is calm.
Sure.
Wanted to counteract it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's harder, breeding dogs or raising kids?
Ooh. Okay.
Is it the same as the kids?
The kids. I mean,
because they can talk back.
They can.
Yeah.
They can. And they keep challenging you in new ways. It's not the same challenges over and over.
Right. That's another question I have. Not to just become the interviewer, but what is the peak intelligence level for a dog in human development? Like your oldest dog, how intelligent are they in human intelligence? Like, do they get to age 3 for a human?
The studies I've read show that dogs are they have vocabulary for about 200 words, really? Which puts them relatively around a 2 to 3 year old kid. And it'll depend on the breed. I mean, my short hairs are certainly not the shining stars for intelligence. Right. Rat terriers are much smarter.
Rat terriers are smarter?
They are. And you'll see that variation, with some of the, the shepherds are pretty intelligent, and there's a lot of variation. But yes, it's about, a kid out of diapers. The only thing that's different with the dogs is they have drives that, like, we don't normally see them in kids in such an extreme way. Like, you don't ever see a kid just wake up and start hurting things, but like a young puppy can.
Right.
Do that.
Right. Just start biting kids' ankles.
Yes, exactly. Rounding up the children.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Wow. So a lot of your listeners are probably looking to start their own breeding
yes.
business.
Yeah, they're looking to start the breeding business. A lot of them already have a logo, or maybe they've kind of dabbled in and maybe put something together themselves, which is a good place to start. I mean, it's where I started.
Yeah.
And so, some are going to be developing one and realizing all the things we can now do with our brands, that we can put them on, use them, and how it can really create that initial feeling and build that rapport with people.
Right.
The recognition. And so, so where do we start with that? And what are we looking for? Like what?
Well, here's an okay place to start. Well, it's so important, the name of your business, because wherever the name stems from, that's where the visuals are going to originate from, So, I mean, okay, so I am the creative director at Sports Illustrated Kids. I design every page of the magazine. It's a very small staff, so I'm in charge of the look and feel of everything. So I find it really hard to design a story if we don't have a good headline to begin with.
Interesting.
Because if the story is just about Giannis Antetokounmpo, for instance, and I just have to start designing something about the great Milwaukee Buck basketball player, there's kind of nowhere to really start sinking your teeth in with visuals,
Right.
So if somebody comes to me with a headline like well, this is off the top of my head, but like what the Buck or something, for the Milwaukee Bucks, then I can start coming up with, okay, what would what the Buck look like? Okay, maybe it's Giannis with a big question mark over his head and he's got a crazy look on his face, something that conjures up that feeling of what the Buck, So depending on what the name of your breeding company is, that can really help drive the visuals. Like if your business is Honest Dog Breeder, that is kind of it's a little bit tougher of an idea to pull visuals out of. I think you landed on a great look for yours, but it probably was a little bit tougher than, say, if your breeding company was like Sasquatch breeding or something, because then you have the entire visual lexicon of what a Sasquatch looks like. You got Bigfoot, you got a Bigfoot paw print, there's so much that you can pull from. But let me just say, any abstract concept can be visualized with typography, logos. You can take an idea like honesty for Honest Dog Breeder, and you can find a way to visualize that just with type. Honesty, you think of transparency, maybe the letters are transparent and there's just an outline to them. It's subtle stuff like that where you can point it out to clients and say, hey, it's because we're trying to indicate transparency, and then they'll say, oh yeah, that's pretty cool that you thought about that. You can do anything with design.
So when you're saying the abstract concept, I always feel like we're looking to sell to our ideal puppy buyers, right? That ideal customer. And we need to give them a feeling of what they're going to get, the lifestyle they're going to get with our dogs. And so we can really build that out with the brand. Right? And so are you suggesting maybe we move into some of those abstract feelings that we kind of have, that we want our people to feel? Like for mine, I have like young families, they're really busy, they like a little bit of chaos, and so they're glutton for punishment, and they get a German short hair, and so they want that crazy because it just fits in with their lifestyle.
They have a crazy lifestyle, so like why not add a little bit more crazy to it
and just have something else that now we can blame the dog, right?
Right.
But they have that fun, and so I like brighter colors for that. I like them to feel that energy when they're on the dog from me. And
you know more about this than I do, but there's all sorts of color theory related to emotions and moods that you want to convey. I don't know. I don't know as much about that stuff.
You're just more natural at it. You don't even know you're doing it.
Or I'm just more like based on like I guess I'm just more superficial, like what just looks good, But I mean, there's something to be said for that, But I think like, go ahead.
Well, what comes to mind, for example, like say you breed badass German Shepherds, these are like top notch, protect your family.
Black and red.
Yes.
Black and red and grunge, texture, scratchy feeling, that kind of stuff. Yeah, but I think any color combination can work. I know a lot of people that do what I do are kind of pretentious gatekeepers of aesthetics, what looks good, what doesn't. You know, you picture a graphic designer and they're turning their nose up at Comic Sans, for instance, you know, really hoity-toity prissy types, you know. I've been like that in my life, you know. I think I've maybe grown out of it. Of course, I started it off by saying, excuse me, you're not getting the magazine title right, you know. But so, but I think anybody can do it. Anybody, you know, you need the tools, of course, but anybody can make something look good.
Yeah.
If you feel passionate about the brand, if you feel passionate about what you're working on. So like, I mean, you know, no font combination, no color combination is out of bounds. Think about it. Dunkin' Donuts, their colors are orange and pink. There's no way that should work, but for some reason, combine it with that rounded font that Dunkin' does, and it just works, you know. And I think Julie, you painted your bedroom walls orange and pink.
I did. I really had a crush on Dunkin' Donuts as a kid.
Yeah. So hey, you know, anything can work. I mean, even like something scatological like brown and yellow can still work. Think of like I don't know. There's got to be some brand for that.
Yeah. Do you find that you can use any color scheme because you can kind of turn up the volume, if you will, on the color, or bring it down to kind of suit your feeling?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we could talk about the color wheel all day, but there are, you know, there's not just blue, there's cyan, cerulean, you know, all kinds of different color notes within things, you know. So you don't want two colors that are going to be super strong and combating each other, you know. Like think of like, well, I don't want to slander our home state, but the U of M Michigan colors, you know, maize and blue are just two awful colors together. They just like, they're just too strong together, you know. Like if there were a way to tint back the blue to warmen up the maize, you know, there's a way to make those colors look good together, but as they did not land on the right hues, you know. The right, what is it, what's the color code that you use online, what is it, the hex color?
Right, hex
they didn't find the right hex combination, you know. I don't know any of that stuff. Is Julie's always asking me like, what's a good hex color for this, and I said, I don't know, man, I work in print, I work in CMYK. If it's not in your Canon printer, I don't know what the combination is, you know. But yeah. So how else should we get into this? Because there's so much to talk about when you're looking for something for
when do you
your
think
company.
So when you're starting with that, so in building your own logo, if you're going to build your own logo, maybe you're not in a position yet to be hiring somebody to do that. What would you would start first with the feeling that you want to be portrayed? Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, you know, what your name is. Like you start with your name, and then
some people just use their last name with their breed or something along those lines.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
so we have a couple of people with like farm or ranch, you know, at the end of it, and I know that those have different connotations.
Yeah, that helps. I mean, it's obvious, but like if your last name is Swan, it just makes sense to incorporate that symbol of a bird, a graceful bird, you know. So then maybe that lends your lettering to be smoother, more graceful, you know. If you were swan breeding and you had a really grungy beat up type, I don't think it would really work, you know. So just try to make things look like they were on purpose, you know. That's like that's most of design, is just making things look like you meant it to look like that, you know. So that somebody, because you can, and this is a whole other aspect of it, but you can design something and then show it to somebody and they'll say, yeah, it looks good, but why did you do it like that? You know, that is always a red flag. You know, if your design is causing people to ask questions about why you did it a certain way, unless you're going for some beautiful abstract statement, that's when you know you need to maybe go back to the drawing board, do a few more iterations, and then remove everything that is causing people to ask questions. So should we talk about, I just designed a thing for you, and we had some fun putting together a badge. Absolutely. So explain what that badge was.
So if you're a member of the Dog Breeder Society, you have the Dog Breeder Society badge you can put on your website with your kennel name on it. And So I, of course, am terrible at this. So I
Mhm.
consulted you and said,
Mhm.
hey, what do you think? And you said, well, let me throw some things together. And it was so great because immediately you sent me this picture. What was it, immediate? I would say we wouldn't expect immediate, but we were putzing around that night.
Yeah, I was free that night.
But you gave me 6 examples, and they were just different types of fonts, different color coordinations, everything within my brand, but
different iterations on the same
okay.
idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so they gave, and I gave you just a couple examples of things I'd seen online that I would like to be similar to. And so you built those for me.
Mhm.
And then I loved it because you said, which one do you gravitate towards? You weren't like, which one do you like? Because I was like, ugh, I couldn't pick. I like this and this and this and this, but I did end up gravitating towards 2. And so then what we did is we looked at those 2 and what do we like on both, and ended up, you kind of merged the concepts.
Yeah.
And then, so then what happens on your side of it?
Yeah. So,
because I was kind of like, I like these.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that was really fun because I could just screenshot the things I was working on and just text it to you right away. And you were just right there, and and I could see the little 3 dots when you were responding. So it was really fun. I was like, okay, we're going to get this done in one night. This is fun. Yeah. But, it was, the sort of the message of this story is like, don't be afraid to play around. I've worked with designers before, and I'll always tell them to always stay in play mode. Always be like a kid in the sandbox. Nothing is too precious. We didn't just say, I didn't just give you one logo and just say, take it or leave it, Jules, and I'll be pissed if you don't take it. I said, here's 6. Which one do you gravitate towards? Now let's try to combine the best elements of the ones that you like. And then you said, okay, I like this one and I like this one. So then I gave you a couple more iterations based on that. And then you said, I like this, but could we change the color of this? And I said, yeah, here you go. So then I gave you a variation on that. And then we probably did that about 10 or 15 times until we landed on something that we liked. And then you said, great, looks perfect. And I said, okay, hang on, let me just work on it for a little bit longer.
And that was interesting.
Yeah. And then, if you work with a good designer, you can have them take their own ideas and elevate it. So I think I added like a little bit of texture. I refined the characters a little bit.
Actually added some dots, more or less, hashes on all the way around.
Yeah.
Or hyphens, like almost like a hyphen, and you created almost like a seam as if it were sewn on.
Yeah, like an embroidered texture, just to give things a little bit more depth, until we got to a spot where you could show it to somebody and they would just accept it as the badge and not be like, that feels wrong. This makes me feel uncomfortable. Why did you do that? Right. But it's because we stayed in play mode. Nothing was too serious. All right. So 10 years ago, Julie came to me and she said, hey, can you design a logo for Bear Paw Ranch? And I said, sure, no problem. And then I came to her with the bad version of what we just talked about, which was, I just said, here you go, Jules, here's the logo, and take it or leave it, And I was an amateur and I didn't know what I was doing. And the work wasn't good. It wasn't as good as I could make it now. And you said, hey, can you change this? Can you change this? And I think I just huffed and puffed and I just said, no, it's take it or leave it, I regret that. I hate that. I was a bad designer,
It was a good logo.
It came out okay, but it could have been a lot better if I had been confident enough to take the feedback and to stay in play mode and to keep working with it and make it better. So
how do you find that? How do you find that in a designer?
So I've hired designers to work for me for the magazine, and it's all, just based on personality and just if it's somebody that you can talk to, somebody that you can take criticism, so many designers like I'm talking about are a hoity-toity, my way or the highway gatekeepers of, what they do, which is stupid, but you just need to be able to take feedback. So when you're hiring somebody to make a logo for your breeding company, you want somebody that you're going to be able to talk to, and you need to set a price point for them where they will be willing to give you those iterations. Because if you're if you need a logo from somebody,
yeah,
and you're saying, okay, I need a logo, I can only pay you $100. If I'm that designer, I'm gonna be the my way or the highway guy. I'm just gonna say, okay, here's the logo. You're not paying me enough to give you iterations to work on it more, you know?
right.
Now, if you were to say, I need a logo for $100, and here is a sketch that I've made, and I need you to essentially recreate that in Adobe Illustrator.
Okay.
I think, it's still $100 is way too cheap, but if you wanted to say, here's a very specific idea, and if you can give me that in a vectorized form, that's maybe worth $300 if it takes you an hour or two of your time. I think that's an appropriate price, but you will get those my way or the highway people if you're not willing to put up the money for them.
And that's
So,
understandable.
go ahead.
We'll stay away from like Fiverr maybe, and
yeah, I hate the site Fiverr. It's like the bottom feeder of the graphic design world, and it's making. Well, do you want to explain what Fiverr is?
Oh yeah, if you're unfamiliar, so Fiverr is basically it's almost like a marketplace where you can put like a bid out for a job, and people can bid to do the job, and you can get stuff done. And sometimes it comes from a foreign country that may or may not speak your language, and it's cheap. It's cheap, but you don't get very many options. You don't really get to work with it, like you're saying, with the iterations and actually like develop it. The things I've seen from it like look cool, but they don't usually fit the company.
Yeah, it's a place where people who are trying to get into graphic design and they need clients, they need to scrape together some cash, they need to get pieces for their portfolio. They go there to get people who are desperate for graphic design work and are not willing to pay much. So it's like the dregs of the industry, essentially. So you're more likely to find somebody who's going to work with you if you can, like you did. You went on Reddit and you found like people who were looking for work on Reddit, and then you set prices and terms with Caitlin on Reddit.
Right.
Yeah, you want to be able to find somebody who has a decent portfolio. And because I work with a bunch of freelance illustrators, and I'm always trying to get across what I have in my head to somebody else,
Sure.
So if I can point to a piece that they've illustrated before, and if I can show that to them and say, I love what you did here. Now, could you take this idea and could you tweak it for this concept? You're a lot more likely to get what you want in the end,
That makes sense.
But yeah, just being able to work with somebody who isn't going to have an ego about it, like I did back 10 years ago. You want to avoid people like me, essentially. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
But I think it was helpful. What really sold me when I saw Caitlin's ad was she was like, I'm all about your business. Everything that you need, tell me and explain it. But what I wasn't prepared for was how much information the designer needs. Like I was shocked they couldn't just climb in my head and see what I see. Oh,
right.
Yeah, I had to find a way to articulate what I was visualizing, or at least hoping to get across and feeling through words. And then and that's where those the better designers really have the ability to take those words and turn them into things that are like you said, take the abstract and turn it into something tangible.
The more information you can give the designer, the better. Let me tell a quick anecdote. Okay, so Julie and I both worked at Arby's when we were kids. She got me the job. She got me grandfathered in. One of our more embarrassing chains that we've worked at, I'd say. So my manager at Arby's was a guy named Dre, super cool guy. I really looked up to him. He had an amazing work ethic. But he came up to me one day, and because I was always taking the placemats at Arby's and drawing little pictures on them, doing all kinds of stuff. Because he got a lot of downtime, nobody likes Arby's. So Dre came up to me one day and he said, "Hey man, you think you could design a tattoo for me?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, Dre. Like, what are you thinking? What do you got in mind?" He said, "I don't have an idea for it. I just want it to look tough." Okay. All right. That's the only restriction. I needed more from him.
Okay.
Do you want chains? Do you want barbed wire? What could tough be?
Right.
I never ended up drawing the tough tattoo for him. But if your business needs a logo,
Mm-hmm.
you need to give that designer as much information as possible so that they have something to go off of. Mm-hmm. Think of the thing with the headline, the Giannis Antetokounmpo thing. The more ideas that you can give them, the more they're going to be able to draw from. If you just said, hey, I need a logo for the Honest Dog Breeder, go give me something, you would have to pay them, $3,000 to ideate, to come up with a bunch of iterations to give you fluid options, but if you can say, this is what I want, this is the feeling I want to get across, this is how I want it to look. And if you can show other logos that do a similar job that you're looking for, that's going to give them a lot more to sink their teeth into. So be as illustrative, is that a word, as possible with them,
like illustrated
as much as possible. I'm not a words guy, all right, I stick with pictures.
So you're saying, okay, so maybe I could come in and say, okay, I breed German short hairs, they point, this is kind of a thing, they work with birds, they're goofy, their ears are ridiculous. That's great. And so that would start to give this feeling, and it also appeals to my ideal customer, because referring to their ears as ridiculous doesn't necessarily appeal to the people that are high drive, crazy, we hunt every day people.
Sure.
But it fits my families. And so maybe start to build the visuals, pull visual topics that you could play with. Yeah. And then also the feeling that should go with it. Is that kind of a place
exactly
to start?
Designers think in visuals, so if you can say, yeah, these are the types of dogs I'm breeding. Yeah. A logo for a German Shepherd breeding group is going to be different from a Labradoodle, Sure. You can picture what a poodle logo is going to look like. It's going to be, roofy. Is that another word?
It is the impression of poodles. I know. It's a big thing right now because everybody's crossing poodles to make doodles. And in doing this, a lot of people would ultimately do really well just to have a poodle, but because of the stereotype of the fancy, I'm too high maintenance, a lot of people are opting for a doodle to get everything that a poodle is not in a poodle.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
it's a fascinating thing.
Wow. Yeah.
So what if you already have a logo and you're like, cool, so I drew this myself. People know it. I hate it. It's not really working for me, as far as it's not giving the feel. It doesn't feel authentic to my brand anymore, my logo, but it's established. What do I do with that?
So if you don't have specific ideas about what needs to change about it, because a lot of times, if you're not a designer, you have a vague feeling that something's wrong, but you're not able to put it into words. So what you need to do in that case is show it to a bunch of people. And say, what do you think of this? But then, most people, if you show them something, they're just going to say, it looks good, because people don't want to offend you.
Right.
But really press them and say, what do you think would make this look more professional? And if you can, show them 2 iterations, show, if you think the color's wrong, show them 2 options. Here's a purple version, here's a green version. People, then they're forced to make a decision, and they're not offending you because they're picking one or the other. Right. Another thing you can do, and this is something I do with my illustration work all the time, and I'm going to take a dramatic pause here. Sorry, Julie made me some bulletproof coffee, so we're sipping that right now. Never had it before. Another thing you can do to visually show why your work looks amateurish, and I do this all the time, is make a 9-frame grid. Put your design in the center, and then put a bunch of professional designs on the outside. So put your logo next to the logo for Starbucks. Put your logo next to the logo for Apple, and see what those logos are doing that yours is not doing.
Yeah.
And you'll immediately have a better sense of what you're missing. I do this with my illustrations all the time. I'm not a great illustrator, but I love drawing. So I'm always trying to get better. And I can put my work up against the work of the greats, and just see, oh yeah, I got a lot of work to do. I can see why, their pieces have more depth, have more color, have better storytelling, So be hard on yourself, and try to get people to give you honest feedback. That's some of the hardest stuff, And if you're already thinking that your logo isn't good, then you should have no ego about it, and you should allow people to be as harsh as possible. Just let them dig in. Get feedback. Have no ego about it.
Sure.
Move forward. Yeah.
What are some things you see when you're looking at logos that you can tell they're amateur? What are just some things that you notice right off the rib?
Here's a classic thing. Is using too many fonts.
Okay.
We're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty a little bit here, but a standard rule of thumb for designs is to, with one sheet or one design or one page of a magazine or one cover, anything, you should go no more than 3 fonts, and even 3 fonts is pushing it,
Sure.
So what is a more sophisticated approach is to pick one font that has a lot of variety, like the font Knockout has 50 different versions of Knockout.
Sure. And when you mean versions? Oh, okay.
Thinner characters for one set. It's all the same family, but it's the same font, but other weights are thicker, thinner, wider, italics, caps, subcaps. There's so much that you can do with just one font. You can squeeze so much life out of one font by capitalizing, by spacing out the characters, by bringing them in nice and tight and tiny. You can do all kinds of stuff. So it will keep your look uniform because you're using the same font, but you're still getting variety out of it, So not clashing your fonts too much that's one thing. And then just making sure that your letters are spaced evenly. The most obvious tell that you don't know what you're doing is if, you're writing out honest dog breeder and the space between the H and the O is huge. The space between the R and the E is tiny, that everything, it needs to be uniform. That's called kerning. Kerning the letters so that they're nice and the spacing between the letters.
I had to do that actually. With the T and honest. It was like orphaned. It was so far away.
Because some characters are naturally like socially distanced from each other. A T is going to socially distance from an I, an I next to an I is tight and cozy, but you got to take special care.
Special care.
So that's like one of the classic things where that's an easy threshold for anybody to cross to make their stuff look a little better.
I like that.
There's so much you could talk about. What else you want to do?
What if you wanted to breed small, say petite Yorkshire terriers, right? Tiny little cute dogs. For men. What does that kind of evoke for? How would you, as you're creative, what would you do? Not and for guys that like want to be tough, or how about the wife? She wants to buy this, but she's trying to convince her husband. What kind of brand?
So you're saying something that is traditionally feminine, but give it something that would be more androgynous or masculine.
To give it something where a man doesn't feel like he had to trade in his pants to like this dog.
That old phrase. I'm not sure. You can toughen up anything with grit and texture. You can make anything look rough. But I don't know. I always think that a mix of masculine and feminine is always going to be the most interesting thing.
How would you play that out?
Like if you think of like David Bowie, for instance, like he's not traditionally masculine. He has a lot of feminine qualities, but that's what makes him such a superstar, or what made him such a superstar. R.I.P. Bowie. But I've told this story to you before. But when the rock band Queens of the Stone Age, when they super awesome band name, when they were trying to come up with a name for their band, they had Kings of the Stone Age. Which for some reason is just not as interesting because it's a masculine thing with a masculine thing. Kings of the Stone Age, it's like a hat on a hat, Queens of the Stone Age just has a different flavor. It's like a chocolate peanut butter connection, Nobody wants chocolate on chocolate, So, video, people who watch the video will see that I have long hair, I don't look like a traditional man, but so I don't think that everything needs to be either masculine or feminine.
Sure.
And things that are too feminine or too masculine are not interesting to me, you know.
You
And
must need that dichotomy.
yeah, well, not a dichotomy, some sort of blending, you know.
Okay.
I love the idea of little teacup. What were you saying? Little Yorkies?
Yeah, little Yorkies.
Yeah, Yorkies. Given a masculine flair. To me, that's funny. Like the image itself is funny, you know. Like I'm picturing like a tough guy with a big burly beard, and he's got a little Yorkie and a baby Bjorn strapped to his chest, you know. And I think that could be like a really cool look, you know. I think that'd be wonderful. I mean, you can play all sorts of games like, oh, men, you know, red testosterone, black and red, you know, that's gonna speak to a man more. And you know, it's true that for the magazine, kids, you know, 90% boys read our magazine. So I was told when I took over the creative director job, stay away from pink. Boys aren't going to look at something that's pink, which I took as a challenge, you know. So like I immediately threw pink on the cover. I'm putting NFL players in pink backgrounds, you know. I'm, you know, taking that and running with it, you know.
How did you do that to not make it feel girly? Because it doesn't feel girly when I look at it.
It doesn't matter, you know. It doesn't, you know, pink, the idea that pink is a girl's color, I don't know where that came from, you know. It's just like it's a lighter shade of red, you know. It's just like,
I know, why is it its own color?
It's a more subtle hue of red, you know. It's like there's nothing wrong with that, you know. There's all kinds of beautiful color combinations with pink. Think of pink and green and pink and black, and you can just make something pop, you know. Pink is a beautiful color, you know. Yeah, and I just hate that sort of dichotomy speak, you know. I think you know, everybody's on a spectrum, and I think that it's really fun to play into that, you know. Yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't feel inhibited by making something match what you traditionally feel should match that idea of a color, you know?
Maybe bringing that out in contrast just to give it some interest is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So even purposefully go against the grain just to.
Sure. Yeah. And I think there's something to be said. Like if you were selling bird dogs, those are dogs that hunt birds, okay. You know, if you design something where the line art was super masculine and intense and gritty line work and drawn with a stiff brush, you know, really aggressive, but your hues were lighter and softer, and you know, maybe you're playing with a teal and a pink, you know, that combination, that's not going to read as too feminine. That's not going to read as too masculine, and it's not going to turn off either gender, in my opinion. You know, so there's a way to do anything, and I just don't want people to feel inhibited, feel like there are any rules. You know, but the key is to do iterations and get feedback. Get iterations, get feedback, and then, you know, another thing is that, like, because I designed the entire magazine myself, you know, so I'm constantly in my head of, am I the only one that thinks this looks good? You know, am I crazy? Like, does this look terrible? You know? So I'm always trying to get feedback from people. I'm always, just so that I feel better, so that I can share the blame with everybody. You know, if the cover looks bad, at least other people looked at it before it went to press, you know? And you'll feel better. You'll feel more secure that your work is good.
Someone else. It's almost like pulling the audience.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, nothing good is made in a vacuum. You know, even geniuses who, you know, we idolize people, you know, a lot of people are working with the team, you know, you know, Quentin Tarantino is not just him. He's got writing, he's got people who he shares his stories with, you know, he's got an editor he works with, cinematographers who contribute ideas, you know. Yeah, don't be an island, you know. Don't think that it'll be better if it all just comes from you. Work with people, be a team player. You'll get a better. I've never regretted showing somebody a design. I've never regretted getting feedback from somebody, because sometimes all it takes is just a little tweak, and then all of a sudden it looks professional and it looks like it was made to look that way, you know. But if you never asked anybody, you'd never know. And don't be a coward. Essentially, don't be a coward. Don't be precious. Don't be a coward. Get feedback. Do iterations.
Yeah.
You're never going to nail it on the first try. Do a bunch of options.
Have you opted for things that didn't necessarily align for you? Like you looked at them and you said, this isn't like my favorite, but it's what everybody else pointed and seemed to really work for.
Yeah. All right. So this is a whole thing. Okay. Because oftentimes I'm trying to come up with cover concepts for the magazine. Oh, we're going to shoot Deshaun Watson in the studio. What kind of things could we have Deshaun Watson do? Yeah. So then I'll go off and I'll sketch options for the cover and I'll draw 3 options. And then I'll think, boy, I really don't like option 2. I really don't like that one. And then I'll show it to everybody. And everybody says, boy, we love option 2. Yeah. So in that situation, I just throw out option 2 before I show anybody. Only show the stuff that you would actually want to work on, you know? I mean, if you're a designer working for somebody,
because you don't want to get stuck with something you don't like.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day, especially if it's going to be your business logo.
Yeah.
But you're saying also to opt for simple. I think sometimes like I would do this and be like, you know, in writing, you try to get too wordy, right? You can use too many big words. And if you use too many big words, people start being like, what was that word? I remember that word. And it doesn't make you seem smart. It just makes it annoying to listen to you. Yeah. And so you have to keep it simple, I think. And so if people are stuttering on that word, it would be a reason to take it out. And same with design, it feels like.
Exactly.
If they're pointing it out, being like, why is this pulling my attention? You're like, well, I don't want you to pull attention to it. I just want you to see it.
Yeah. What's the classic thing? If you're getting ready to go out for a night in the town, you get dressed up, you put a hat on, you put your necklace on, you put a jacket on, and then you put a scarf on, and then you put another scarf on. Before you leave the house, look in the mirror and just take one thing off and you're going to look better. Just always remove one thing before you leave the house, you know, simpler the better, less clutter, you know, make every shape tell. You don't need any unnecessary shapes, you know? Yeah.
So you're on the side of simple. That's
hard. And like, if you think of logos, you know, the trend in logos now is just like to be so minimal, to be just like almost nothing there, you know? Think of, well, we were talking about this at breakfast today. The logo for Apple computers, when it first started, was like this beautiful, illustrated, elaborate image sketch of Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree, you know, and there's a beautiful countryside behind him and the grain on the tree and leaves and everything and an apple above his head. And now the logo for Apple is 2 shapes. It's the apple and then it's the leaf, you know? So things narrow down to the hardest diamond that they can be, with no unnecessary pieces. The simplest version of it, you know, the most compact version of the idea. Apple. You can tell that story with Isaac Newton sitting in a beautiful, lush countryside, or you can just show an apple, you know? And even the apple itself is the simplest visual of the apple, you know? You're not seeing a shine mark on it. You're not seeing detail. You're not seeing, you know, you're just seeing an apple with a bite taken out of it, you know? Reduce things to their simplest form.
And that's going to be what's most impactful.
That's what's going to read the quickest for people, you know? You want people to immediately get the idea right away, looking at it.
It should just have the impact and not make you think.
It should, you should get it right away, you know? Go ahead.
Well, you were talking earlier about, we kind of got off subject with the rebrand. So say you have one and you wanted to change your logo because it no longer aligned. Is there like do you just make small tweaks to it until it's the new logo, or is it okay to rebrand, or what do you?
Yeah, I think, you know, most, if you're making small tweaks, usually only you is going to be the one that notices. We were talking about how the creative director at Rolling Stone has been making tiny inscrutable tweaks to the Rolling Stone logo for like 10 years now. And like, you would never notice like getting it in the mail every month. But if you compared the two from the logo today to the logo 10 years ago, you say, oh yeah, of course. Like, you know, they removed the 3D version, you know, it's flat now, you know, this letter's been tweaked. This has been tweaked, you know? And I'm constantly making changes to the magazine. I'm constantly changing fonts and making things smoother, better, and removing things so that it's at the simplest form, you know? Don't settle for a bad design. If you're not happy with it, then what's the point? You know, just change it. Nobody's gonna be upset, you know.
That's
like
true.
I mean, you hear stories of like JC Penney changed their logo and everybody got pissed, you know. It's like and then they had to change it back, you know. Gap did the same thing. Gap changed their logo from the skinny condensed font to like Helvetica, and everybody got in an uproar, and then they changed it back due to pressure. But that's Gap, you know. That's not Bob's breeding company, you know. It's like it's more important that it reflects you. It reflects your passion.
Sure.
So I wouldn't worry about making changes. Never settle. Just keep going until you get it right.
You just kind of roll it out with excitement. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think you need to do any sort of rollout if you're changing it. You know, you just here's the new logo. Yeah. I don't even need to talk about it. You know, just go. Yeah.
I like that. Very good. Anything else, advice-wise, you think you should throw at us that we should know?
No, I'll just reiterate. Don't have an ego. Stay in play mode. Never settle. Don't be a coward. Keep working. Make it fun for yourself. Yeah, and you'll end up with a look that you like. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just keep tweaking it until you're happy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on down.
Of course.
You flew all the way out.
I flew out just for this.
Interview.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun, Jules. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor. I'm happy to.
Pleasure.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.